Coming across right now, an airplane first flown after World War II, 1948. That's the North American T-28 Trojan. Many of the World War II aircraft you'll find today are part of the American Airpower Museum right here at Republic Airport in Farmingdale. They're being sponsored this weekend by Stop and Shop Supermarkets, Bristol Assisted Living, Bethpage Federal Credit Union, Cockpit USA, and Northrop Grumman. The squadron includes a P-47 Warbird built right here on Long Island at Republic Aviation over 60 years ago. The Navy Corsair fighter that we just saw go by, a P-40 Warhawk, a Grumman Avenger, a B-25 Mitchell bomber, T-6 Texans, and a C-47 Warbird aircraft. The C-47 was considered to be one of the 5 most important weapons of World War II, as described by Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower, who later became President of the United States. The DC-3, a twin-engine cargo aircraft, was not equipped with any weapons, but it was so important to the war effort that was what was described by Dwight Eisenhower as one of the 5 most important weapons. Here's the Corsair. Notice the bent wing design. It has a 2,000 horsepower motor on the front, an 18-cylinder radial engine, and a huge propeller with an over 15-foot in diameter swing. It was designed for the United States Navy to be used on board carriers. And early on, it was difficult for Navy pilots to land on the carrier because they were seated so far back in the fuselage they couldn't see over the nose in order to land on the deck of the carrier. So they were sent out to Marine units, and it was the Marine Corps that put it to great use in the Pacific Theater. And back in the late 1970s, there was a television show that chronicled the flights of the Corsair with the Black Sheep Squadron, Pappy Boyington. Now, I want you to keep your eyes out to the left. And I'm not going to be playing any music here for a while because I want you to get a chance to hear some of these big radial engine bombers and fighters coming in from the left. The B-17 from the Yankee Air Museum outside Detroit at Belleville, Michigan. 4 1,200 horsepower radial engines. Let's take a look and listen to one of the heavy bombers from World War II. Above it, the consolidated PBY patrol boat, flown by the Navy, also used by the United States Army. Over 11,000 of these DC-3s or C-47 aircraft were built. They changed aviation and made commercial air travel viable. The Catalina, as you see it coming across Show Center now, is a flying boat able to land on the water. It was used extensively for search and rescue operations in the Pacific Theater. As we see the C-47 turn away from us, you see the stripes on the wings and the fuselage. Those were known as invasion stripes. And it was on June 6th of 1944 when the Allies invaded German-held Normandy, France, that stripes were painted on all Allied aircraft so our guys on the ground and our guys in the air would not inadvertently shoot down one of our own aircraft. Coming in from the left, the B-17 Flying Fortress. 12,000 of these were built. They carried a bomb load typically of about 5,000 pounds, and and it took 10 men to fly and defend as they do a watermelon drop. There you go, dropping the watermelon. You can see the water turn red as they hit. There was a pilot, a co-pilot, a radio operator, a navigator, a bombardier, two waist gunners, a tail gunner, and a belly turret gunner, and all of those 10 crew members were responsible for flying and defending these airplanes. Coming in from the left, the aircraft known as the Trojan, the T-28, built by North American Aviation as a transition trainer from piston engine aircraft to become, for pilots who would then become jet pilots in the beginning of the jet age. It's too bad we have this very strong off-crowd wind because it's very difficult to hear the sound of the radial engines, and that sound becomes more and more rare. All of these aircraft can be seen on the ground and in the air back at Republic Airport this weekend, flying along with an armored column that includes tanks and artillery. Put the two together and you got hours of the American military history operating right in front of you. The American Airpower Museum at Republic hosts a number of visiting historic aircraft during the year, and this B-17 that we've seen fly by is the Yankee Lady from the Yankee Air Museum. Of the over 12,000 B-17s that were built in World War II, only about 13 remain flyable anywhere in the world. Here goes the Corsair, the bent-wing bird. As I started to tell you earlier, the 13-foot in diameter propeller was so large, it needed to be that large to absorb the 2,000 horsepower from the engine, but it made it a challenge for aircraft. Up here, some more drops. The bent-wing bird, it was a challenge for the designers to build a landing gear for the Corsair that would be strong enough and long enough, yet light enough to not make the airplane too overweight. And so, Chance Vought designers took advantage of an aerodynamic concept that brought from the fuselage at 90 degrees, they bring the wing down 90 degrees, bent the wing down, and then extended the landing gear from the lowest spot in the wing, and then bent the wing back up. Hence the nickname bent-wing bird. It was so potent, with a top speed of over 417 miles per hour, that the Corsair was known by the Japanese in the Pacific as Whistling Death. Initially, as I mentioned, designed for use on aircraft carriers, the Vought Corsair was difficult to land, and so it was relegated to land units. It was difficult to land on the carrier, so it was relegated to land units in the Pacific. And the Black Sheep Squadron, Happy Boyington, Greg Boyington, who had 28 aerial victories to his credit, had a television show about him and his Black Sheep Squadron. Here comes the Corsair. If you were watching television or old enough to be seeing TV back in the late 1970s, you could turn on your television and hear something like this. Corsairs were built, and it was the British who took some Corsairs. They made some modifications. They changed the canopy from a greenhouse canopy to what was known as a Malcolm hood, a bubbled canopy, raised the pilot up, and took advantage of the bent wing to fly an oval approach to the carrier. By 1944, the Corsair was back operating aboard carriers again, providing great They were the big friends, along with the B-24 Liberator, the B-17s and the B-24s were known as the heavy bombers. In front of us here at Show Center right now, the C-47 Bird. The Navy called it the Dakota, or the Skytrain. It was also named that. It was used as a troop carrier. It could carry airborne paratroopers, about 30 of them. And they would fly over the battlefield, and in a matter of just less than a minute, all 30 guys would be out wearing combat packs equal to their own body weight from low altitude. They were also tasked, these aircraft were also tasked with towing troop gliders. And later on, they were actually used as armed aircraft in the Korean War. They put cannons in the side, and the pilot would circle around a target with a special sight in his left window, and they were able to direct fire from high-powered guns out the left side of the aircraft, and they called it the Spooky Gunship. Here comes the Yankee B-17 once again, all the way from Belleville, Michigan, outside of Detroit, and the Yankee Air Museum. One of only about 13 flyable B-17s anywhere in the world. Coming through very, very rapidly now and pulling up with the smoke on the North American T-28 Trojan. Originally built for the Air Force, the T-28 had an 800 horsepower motor on the front. And the Navy was also looking for a new trainer. And they saw the T-28 and thought it might be good for them, but they felt the 800 horsepower engine was not powerful enough. So they switched over to a 1,425 horsepower engine. And that became the Navy's post-World War II transitional trainer. As students, or cadets I should say, transitioned from more basic piston engine aircraft into jet aircraft. That was the T-28B with a more powerful engine and a bigger propeller. And then the Navy decided to use it for a carrier qualification aircraft. So they shortened the propeller blades a few inches so they wouldn't become crashing down on the deck, and put a tailhook on it, and it became the T-28C. Then during the Vietnam conflict, the T-28 found its way into combat with some remanufactured T-28B aircraft that were outfitted with armament, white phosphorus rockets, and they became a counterinsurgency aircraft known as the T-28D. Here comes the PBY Catalina, the flying boat. There is one of these aircraft undergoing restoration at the American Airpower Museum right now. And you can see it there over at Republic Airport. Flight experiences are available in the C-47 airborne transport plane, a T-6 Texan, and even an airplane from the golden age of aviation, the Wantagh. And with Father's Day coming up, if you're looking for a birthday gift, flight experiences on these aircraft will be remembered for a lifetime. As one who's flown on some of these airplanes, I would really urge you to consider doing that. And connecting with our aviation heritage, make sure you stop by and tip your hat to the Bristol Assisted Living and Stop and Shop for getting these airplanes in the air. That PBY that has just flown by is a compelling aircraft to see over Jones Beach during the early dark days of America's entry into World War II. The waters off New York Harbor were hunting grounds for Nazi U-boats. Nazi submarines seeking to torpedo tankers and freighters leaving New York bound for England. And one of the few effective defenses against the submarine threat was the PBY maritime patrol plane, similar to the ones we see here today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring the Corsair inbound. He's overhead now. Let's watch as the whistling death or the bent-wing bird does an aerobatic routine. I believe it's Dan Dameo who controls longtime pilot for the American Airpower Museum. 417 mile per hour top speed. We won't see that here today because in those days, in World War II, the Corsair had 130 octane fuel and a supercharger helping it. But still, the Corsair remains one of the fastest piston engine aircraft of all time. And one of the longest production runs of any aircraft in the world. And if my memory serves me correctly, it is the longest production run of any single engine, piston engine fighter in history. And that production run spanned from 1940 to 1953 when the last Corsair came off the production line in February of that year and went to the French Air Force. 12,571 Corsairs. Now, you may have a different number than I do in your history books. If you know a different number than my number, then you are right. Because the history books vary widely in terms of production numbers, but 12,571 seems to stick in most books for the production run of the Corsair. But it was not only built by Chance Watt, the prime contractor and the designer of the aircraft. When their production lines were stretched to the maximum and couldn't produce anymore, and yet the Navy and Marine Corps needed more, other companies stepped in to help Chance Watt. And these other companies built the Corsair under license, which meant that, in this case, Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company and also Brewster Aviation got the plans, got the tooling, and set up production lines to build Corsairs in other